As you saw in the previous movie, making a connection to a website in Contribute is a snap as long as you've been provided with a site connection key and its password. But if you don't have a site administrator to create the key for you, or if you actually are the site administrator, you'll have to make the connection yourself. Now, just to be clear, if you're working solo and you're using Contribute to update a website or a blog just on your own, you don't need to generate a site connection key file. You just need to create a site connection, which involves telling Contribute where your site is located online and providing the username and password to access your site. You only need to generate a connection key when you want to provide other users access to the site through their own copies of Contribute. So again, when you're working on your own, you need to make a site connection. When you're working with others, you need to create a site connection key. So let's get a quick rundown of exactly what information you'll need to make a site connection in Contribute. The first thing you'll need to know is your own name and email address. You need to provide this information so other Contribute users working on your site will be able to contact you to do things like get a site connection key, or to review a draft, or to send you a draft. You'll also need to know the actual web address of your site, which is the address that anyone would type into their web browsers to get to your site. For example, http://www.tcloud.com. You'll also need to know the method used to connect to your site. If you're the site administrator, you probably already know this. If not, your web hosting provider, meaning the person who's actually in charge of the server hosting your website, will be able to tell you this information. You can see the 4 choices here are FTP, SFTP, WebDAV, or local. If you're not familiar with these connection protocols, don't worry. The next movie is dedicated entirely to explaining these. You'll also need to know the connection address of the web server. This is usually different than the browser address. Sometimes your site connection address will be a series of numbers called an IP address, something like 68.32.152.something. Other times it might be an address similar to the browser address like ftp.tcloud.com. Again, this is something your web hosting provider will be able to tell you. Your web hosting provider also assigns you a username and password so you can access the web server, so you'll need to have this information on hand as well. Finally, you might need the full path to the folder on the server containing your website. Some hosting providers will assign you a direct address like ftp.tcloud.com, but others might tell you that your web server's address is something like ftpyourhost.com and then tell you to place your site inside a folder called tcloud.com or whatever your site is named. But again, if this is the case, your web hosting provider will let you know. So those are the most important pieces of information you'll need to have in order to make a site connection in Contribute. But before we make a connection, I want to take some time in the next movie to give you a little more detail on the site connection methods, FTP, SFTP, WebDAV, and local.